Alright guys, Hayzink here, welcome back to the channel for another Street Fighter Duel video, and no, your eyes are not deceiving you. I am seriously about to start a discussion about the topic that you have seen in the title and in the thumbnail. At this point I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to make that title, but it is going to revolve around Street Fighter Duel being too free to play for its own good. Now this is going to be a little bit of a divisive topic, and I'm really encouraging you guys to take part in discussion in the comments down below, because I want to know your take, what you think, and if you even agree remotely with what I'm saying, because it's all about discussion. We all have different opinions, and if we didn't, life would be extremely boring. So I do invite you to agree, disagree, agree somewhat, whatever, right? But you may or may not be aware, Street Fighter Duel isn't making that much money anymore, right? And a lot of people put that down to various different reasons, but I think it's not making money anymore, mainly because it's too free to play. Now, I need to really clarify what free to play means. Free to play means how much content can you beat, how far can you go, how well can you progress without spending money. It doesn't mean you can get all the latest and greatest new units without spending, okay? I'm not saying it's generous with summons, I'm not saying it's a game that is easy to get these new premium units and stuff like that. I'm saying it's too free to play for its own good. Now, allow me to elaborate. In the past, whales have whaled. Ask yourself a question. Why do whales whale? I think we ultimately know the answer to that. It's not the same for everyone, right? You've got people who make content who do it for content reasons. You've got people who are just really crazy into collecting, but funnily enough, you never really see those people topping leaderboards and stuff because they're more about collecting for their boxes, okay? But whales who always like dominate leaderboards and stuff pay for an advantage, okay? Hence the term pay to win. That is literally why that phrase exists, because people spend money to win. And fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your point of view, they do win quite a lot. Right, they spend a lot of money, and these games are predicated on getting those people who will pay to beat the next person, okay? It's why in things like Super Showdown, have you never noticed that in Super Showdown, and I'm using Street Fighter as an example, but this applies to every game, right? Have you never noticed in Super Showdown, at the start, the two biggest whales in a bracket will get matched together? And not all the time, but more often than not, whichever one of those two big whales wins that first match will quite often win the overall thing. That's because the game is pitting those two people against each other, because they are maybe possibly likely to outspend the other person to try and get an advantage to win, okay? So what they do, they try and match up two people who might get competitive, who have money, so they spend more money because they want them to pay to win, okay? Again, in the past, that regularly happened. People who would go out whale day one to get your Akumas, your evil Ryus, blah blah blah, right? That's just how it would work. Now, as the game has progressed, things have changed. You can now see that units like Flame Adon, for example, now dominate, okay? And you don't need to pay for those characters. Now, this is where the first debate in my whole video is going to come up, and I'm just going to address it right now. If we go and we look at the kind of current top scores that you can see here, I'm going to give a big shout out to Baka. He is doing very well in this. You can see here, current top score he's got is 1061 million just with his Flame Adon team. First red flag, people are going to say he has got Flame Chun-Li on that team, so you can't call this a free to play team. Here is my take on that, right? Again, you guys can agree, you can disagree, you can say whatever you want, okay? If a player has spent money and bought one character in a game, right, and they have then decided, I'm not going to spend anymore, I've got this one character, that's fine. See, as far as I'm concerned, they've switched and they've become a free-to-play player. You might say, no, they're not, because they have this one character you cannot get if you were free-to-play. To me, that sounds like some weird vampire cult where you're either a pure-blood vampire or you're like a half-blood or something, and half-bloods are like, get away from me, you're not real. I don't go for that bullshit, right? At the end of the day, I do not think one unit, because that one unit, actually, shout out to Payne, it's a long time since you've maybe heard Payne Blade's name. He said quite a while ago that, honestly, if you wanted to, you could make the decision in this game to purchase one character and never purchase a character again, and it's Flame Chun, and you'll probably be absolutely fine. And that was long before the likes of Adon and stuff like that came along. To me, I would not judge someone for that, because you could have easily built up things like your Google Play rewards, you could have built up loads of different ways to actually not have spent money. And if you've not put your hand in your pocket and spent money, I don't think it's fair to class that person as not being free to play, right? It's just my opinion. Anyway, I would class that team as predominantly a free to play team, right? If you also look at leaderboards when it comes to actual events, which I can't show you right now, you will more often than not find that on those first two teams, your second team is also what you would class as free to play. It's the Bison, Dalsim, Shield setup kind of thing, right? Sometimes it's got Flame Blanket in there or whatever, but the team itself is like a free to play team. So the rest of the setups are just generalised characters, okay? Which is why you're now seeing a lot more free to play players or extremely minuscule spenders appearing on the leaderboards, okay? And in some occasions you can even do it using characters like, for example, you've got Phalon, right? He can, and depending on how you do it, he can almost fill the Flame Chun-Li role, because he's got this flame penetration type thing where he increases damage, right? So now we've got that out of the way. The thing that they've all got in common is you cannot whale out to make those teams better. Even if you've got Flame Chun-Li. Once you've got Flame Chun-Li, you've got Flame Chun-Li. You can't spend more money to improve that team. So you can't pay for an advantage. You can't pay to win. So this is why I think Street Fighter Duel is now in this weird situation. If whales can no longer pay for an advantage, why would they pay at all? Okay, all you've got left is your box collectors, right? Your box collectors are still box collectors. They still want units just to have the complete set, right? But these people who really get off, they get their ego stroked or whatever by coming first in a leaderboard, if they are now looking at their box and they are seeing that they are Onis, they are Akumas, they are trendy Kamis who I suppose never really reached the highs anyway, but when they can see that those units that they maybe spent a lot of money chasing to max out can no longer even put a dent in the scores, that people who have never spent a penny, or they've spent literally $30 or $50 to get one unit, is now pushing higher scores than them because they have more patience, right? Let's just be clear, okay? You can't just hit auto and get these scores. You've got to you've got to put in the time and stuff, right? Which, fine, you do deserve to be rewarded for that, okay? But that doesn't matter to a whale. A whale literally wants to throw money at a problem. They want to pay so that they can auto. They want to pay so that they can win. Now, I'm not saying that's a good mindset. I in fact think that's a bad mindset. I've got to play manually, right? And it's boring as all hell. I'm not going to lie. The Flame Adon thing, you've just got to keep going and going and going and going and going and going and going until you find that exact microsecond that you should have attacked. You've got to have the timing right where you hit your next. You've got to nail it, right? And to be honest, it is monotonous and it is tedious and it's really bothersome when you've sat for maybe 4, 5, 6 hours. You've finally nailed that score. You're like, bang, I've just put up 2 billion. That's fine. And then you wake up the next morning and you've got to chase it again because the next person sat and they sat longer than you and they just so happened to get the stacks faster. That is very monotonous and very tedious, and it's rewarding to do that if you're a free-to-play player who's not put in any money. But if you're someone who's spent 10, 15, 20,000 dollars on a game, which some of these people have, right? And you're like, wait a minute, the only reason I've got this money is because I need to work a lot to make this money. Your desire to continue to spend is gone. It's completely gone altogether. So here is my overall point here. Has becoming so free to play, which is good for players who don't spend. Let's get that clear. It is good for players who don't spend, right? I think it's bad overall for the health of the game. And I say that because as much as we would like it not to be the case, what happens if people are not spending decent money on games like this? Take a moment to think about it. I think you all know the answer. Yes, ultimately they end up closing early. Now this isn't me saying I think Street Fighter Duel's about to close or anything. That's not what this video is about. It is more about people wanting the game to have longevity. And as crazy as this is going to sound coming from me, because I don't want to spend money on this game anymore. I don't, right? I would like to become one of those tainted free to play, although I never can be, because you just look at my battle power. I've done too much at the start to ever be considered free to play. I could not spend money for the next year and go free to play, and no one would ever consider that to actually be true, right? Because I gained too much benefit from my earlier spending, right? But the point I'm trying to make is I don't really ultimately want to have to deal with, I can't get good rewards anymore because this person's spending, this person's blah blah blah, right? But I want to continue playing the game. And unfortunately, if whales don't have that built-in advantage that spending gives them, they're not going to spend. Now these games in particular, I'd say idle games are actually the worst for it. They know this, okay? Because what they do, and you'll know this yourself, they launch new servers all the time. And the reason they launch new servers all the time is so that whenever a new server rocks up, there can be a new king of that domain, right? The whole idea behind it is they don't want to put all the whales together because there's always going to be a bigger fish. They want to give people enough of an ocean to call their own, that they can be the big fish within that ocean. Because if that person is getting enough of an ego boost, enough of a sense of fulfillment, dopamine, whatever it is they get from spending to win, they don't want to tarnish that, so they give them a smaller bracket to do it within. Okay, not so small that they don't need to spend, hence the reason battle zones exist, but again, they're kind of tight, they're not massive, and you don't get tons of whales within those battle zones. The whole game, the whole concept is predicated about making those people feel like if you just spend that little bit more money, you'll win, right? Whereas now, we have a meta within game that isn't really necessarily allowing that, okay? Now, I think ultimately, when a game is too free to play, it can lead to the downfall of that game. And I do think that if you actually track things from when Street Fighter Duel started to make less money, which it did do, it's quite obvious, you can go and you can check, I'm not saying anything that's not publicly available. When people started to get more wind of Dalsim, use this team, you'll really start to ramp up your scores. Spending dropped a little, because people didn't need as many of these high key units. Since Flame Add-ons came in, spending's dropped off a cliff. Could it be coincidence? I doubt it, because I simply need to look at my friends list, my guild, and lots of other things, and I can see people who I know firsthand that have spent a lot of money, who just gave up, just stopped playing the game altogether. And ultimately, I can't get a hold of them to find out, but I do think it's down to this, because they went from being maybe second, because I was usually first, no brag there, right? I was usually first. They would go from maybe second, third to lucky to scrape in the top 10, and you just look through the leaderboards and you see the same thing over and over. It's the RNG teams that people have just given up their whole entire day to grind out, and they're not getting the rewards anymore, so they give up because they're like, you know what, I've spent 20 grand in this game. I've spent 20 grand in this game, and now I can't even beat someone who's maybe spent £50 tops, or maybe they've not spent anything at all. Do I think that should be the case? Oh, by the way, just to say, just a quick side note, shout out to my own battle zone here. I'm going to show you something just so that you can see that I'm not like braggy, because I'm not braggy. This man here, Yusuf, he's now my main challenger on the leaderboard. It either is a case of I come first or he comes first. I think it averages out to I maybe just get more firsts, but it's getting kind of close now. Just let me show you something, right? And shout out to you, Yusuf. I'm not like, this is not any weird shaming or anything. This is just me trying to prove a point here. So if we go and look at Yusuf, right? So you can see Yusuf there, right? He's got decent units, right? Decent units. There's his power and all the rest of it. And then we can look at mine. Obviously mine's is like significantly higher, right? The main difference here is I think this man has a lot more patience than me, because more often than not, his Flame Aid-on scores tend to end up being higher than mine. They tend to end up being higher than mine. Even running the exact same teams, exact same timing, everything, like identical. The thing is, with that team, you can run it 100 times, and you can get this random outlier where you've got all your flame stacks within the first 2 or 3 attacks, and then that score is just way through the roof. But you've got to keep going, and then when you finally get it, you need to have your next 3 teams also lining up. If that happens, awesome. I lose patience, I can't be bothered with that, right? I get a good enough score that if I can get at least top 3, I'm happy, because there's a couple of tickets difference, right? It doesn't matter to me that much. What's the difference between 16 tickets and 20 tickets? It's what, 4 tickets? Who cares, right? I don't care. Some people do care though, right? For some people it's literally about being number 1. I just want the tickets. 16, 18, 20, I'm happy with any of them, to be completely honest, right? But obviously what I'm trying to show you there is you don't have to have been this ungodly whale to achieve these things. Now clearly he's still a whale, just obviously not to the extent I've whaled. But this is what I'm trying to get at. Could this be the reason I'm not spending as much? No, I know the reason I'm not spending as much. I'm not spending as much for personal reasons, like money's tight if I'm being honest. But as well as that, I don't want to reward certain things that's happening within the game. So I've made the option or the choice, that no, I'm not gonna. Literally the last thing I purchased in this game was those little stones so that I could check out exactly how the labyrinth worked to make the video for you guys. But other than that, it'd maybe been like 2 months before I'd put anything into the game before that, right? And to be honest, unless they add something new and magical that I have to see just so that I can explain to you guys how it works, I'll probably continue to do so. But I ultimately feel that this game being so free to play, not free to get characters, again, let's just make that distinction, but free to play, is ultimately hurting it. Unfortunately, the only way to fix that is to make it less free to play, which I think most of you would actually not want. And again, I've said myself, I don't want, but you can't have both. That's wherein lies the problem. You're not going to have the whales who continue to spend for an advantage, spending when they don't get an advantage for doing so. Again, harking back to Pain, I'm fairly sure he may have touched on a topic like this quite a while ago. Not exactly the same, but I just vaguely remember in one video he said that whales pay for an advantage, and they should get an advantage whether you like it or not, because they're paying. I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, but there was something along those lines, and can anyone really argue with that? whether you think it's right or wrong, there's no skill in paying, right? There's not. If you buy the number 1 spot in something, awesome, you bought number 1, who cares? You can say you've earned that. I don't think you necessarily have. I can't say I have if I've got better units than people. But if you've spent 20 grand on getting your box better and all the rest of it, then if you have a degree of knowledge on how to use them, then yeah, you probably should beat someone who hasn't spent a penny, right? But when you are going into something like for like, and it just completely comes down to RNG, and you no matter how much money you've spent, you can't influence that decision, I can see why you would stop spending. And how they fix that, I don't know. I ultimately don't know. I don't know if they can fix it. I don't know if the ship sailed. You're not going to get people coming back. But I just want to know what you guys think. I know this has ended up being a little bit of a meandering ramble from me, but it's just something I've been thinking about, because a lot of times we can quite often say that this game isn't very free-to-play friendly, but I think we sometimes need to separate what that means, because it's extremely free-to-play friendly. It's just not very cheap when it comes to getting new units. But when you don't need those units, does it really matter? Sure, one mode in the game needs those units, and it's Super Showdown. But if you take yourself away from that one mode, you don't need those units. They literally are not a requirement for this game. You can push high numbers, get great rewards, do very well without having any of these units. The only one place it really matters is Super Showdown, and again, if you're willing to say, I don't need to worry about that, then the fact that you don't even feel the need to spend, why would people spend? So let me know what you think. Do you completely disagree? Do you think this is a completely hot take? Which it might well be, I don't know. It's just my thoughts rambling out my mouth. Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to have a discussion about this, and do you know what? If the comments are actually good, like if people put some effort into them, I might follow this back up by responding to your comments, like telling you guys what I think. So if you don't see me responding a lot in the first 24 hours of this video to comments as you're posting them, it's probably because I've actually decided, you know what, I might actually just do this on video. We'll talk about the points. Agree, disagree, whatever. Your take, your explanation, and hopefully, because I do know that some people watch, hopefully we can get some comments from some people that I can see on my leaderboard towards the top end here, if you guys are watching, because, I mean, you can see here, he does so well, like so well. Like, clearly he has spent at some point, but it's not in like a giga whale territory or anything like that, right? We've also got people like Pika who might chime in. I think he'll maybe understand a little bit what I'm saying here, but I want to know your points of view. So jump on, let me know. Again, maybe I'll do a response video, maybe I'll do a follow-up video, we'll see. All I'm saying is, people talk about Topjoy being greedy, blah blah blah. I actually think that, considering one of the strongest units they ever gave us was Blanca, some of the free-to-play units are arguably the best units in the game. Can anyone argue that Dalsim and Flameadon are not the best 2 DPSs in the game? Like, totally. Can anyone argue that? Let me know in the comments down below. Do you think this game is too free to play for its own good? Interesting topic. Let's know your thoughts. I've been Hayzink, thanks for watching, catch you in the next one, peace.